So today I'm going to go over how to make a value collage still life. So as you can see, I've already done a bit of work on it. So here is my preliminary drawing. You can see that I've done a drawing outlining the shapes of value. And in some cases here, we'll have some shapes that will kind of push together, like this contour here between the front of the label and the back of the label. You'll see this is a 4 here, this is a 4 here. So this barrier will actually kind of disappear once we start collaging. So some of the first steps I've already done is I have 4 sheets of watercolor paper here, and I've kind of tone them in a 5-step value scale. And I have a lot of light on this number 4, so it looks quite a bit lighter than it is. So we have 5 as our darkest value, 4, 3 is our mid-tone, 2, and then 1 is the white of the paper. I have my value scale here, so as I did this drawing, I kind of looked back and forth between my setup, my drawing, and I said, okay, judging by this 5-step value scale, what value does that shape need to be according to the shape next to it? And so that's kind of what this assignment is all about. It's about that comparison that you do when you are drawing. And so what we're doing here is we're really kind of focusing on shape, and that's shape and value's role in the depiction of light. So one thing I mentioned is I'm going to kind of figure out which is my kind of dominant value in the composition. And as you can see here, this shape here is a 3, as is this shape. So that makes up, if I kind of block that out, that's about what, maybe 2/3 of my composition. So I'm actually going to use 3 as my backdrop, and I'm going to kind of push darker from there with some of the shapes and bring some of the shapes lighter than that. So I have my 5 steps, 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be kind of my base value, and I'm going to set these aside. And so some of the materials you'll need here is something to cut with. I have an X-Acto knife. You could use scissors. If you're really in a tight spot, you can really kind of tear your paper. I would just ask that as you tear, maybe have your line and sort of tear back and away. So that way, when you line that up over another piece of paper, you have that value all the way going to the edge, going all the way to the edge. To contrast that, if I tear the other way, you'll see there, I'll hold out my hand so you can see it. There you have this kind of like white halo happening. And which you can see it exaggerated here. So it's basically this versus this. I'm actually going to be transferring these shapes. So what I'm going to do first is trace down my compositional rectangle. So I have that in my copier paper here. I want to transfer that to my 3 value toned sheet, so I can trim my composition to size. So what I'm going to do is, and this is basic contact transfer. So my kind of goal here is to rub the charcoal on the back, and you can also do this with like a soft dark pencil. And I am going to use a ballpoint pen because that's going to have a very concentrated point of pressure. I have a cutting mat here on the keyboard tray on my desk. So essentially what we have now is a mid-tone covering our whole composition. And what we're going to do is, and then this will, depending on your setup, this will vary. If you have like a dark backdrop, then you're going to start with your 5 and kind of bring everything up from there. In this case, I have a 3 value tone, and I'm going to push some of my shapes darker, pull some of my shapes lighter. And so what I'll do is I'm just gonna kind of jump to 5 first, just to get kind of my major placeholders. And you'll notice with the transfer, that's not going to work very well on my black. So one thing I could do is I could either use something like chalk. I could transfer onto the back because that's still white. That would require mirroring it. That may get too convoluted. But what I'm going to do is, since the ballpoint pen is a concentrated point of pressure, I'm just going to let it actually emboss the paper, which is to say we're just, basically making a linear indentation in the watercolor paper. So I'm pushing pretty hard here. And so just for placement, just to show you some of the kind of larger shapes here, I'm going to use my preliminary drawing just to get the height of that, and that goes all the way to that left edge. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, looking at my kind of 4s pretty well dispersed through here, I am going to take my 4 and actually cut this whole, here, let me ballpoint pen it first. So I have a 4 kind of abutting this 5, and then this 4 here, this is going to come all the way up here, and I'm actually going to cut this here. That's all going to kind of melt together. Here's my lid. It's going to cut back here, and then back down like so. And then we have our 4 here that's going to connect to. So I'm kind of pushing in or cutting out this whole big shape, and then these other modulations are going to stack on top of that. Fives on top of the 4 here. So that's what I was talking about there. So I'm just kind of laying these on top. And lay it down. So that'll really kind of. So it's actually between that 5. It's actually sitting somewhere like that. So that's more like it. That's where our bottom edge is. Twos. On how I use my 2s. Basically, they are paper seen through the transparent glass, because that transparent glass is going to, if we're talking about this in reference to painting, that would be and color, of course. That greenish glass is going to attribute some color identity to, since we're seeing it through there. Uh, you translate that to value, that is going to mean that it's going to that color identity that it's imparting on that white paper through the glass. That's going to translate through, a very kind of slight step darker as far as the value goes. So that was my actually is something that I saw, and so that's my kind of reasoning for moving that shape from a 1 to a 2. Here, this one's somewhere around here. One of the last things is this is of the label as it kind of comes around. So I'm actually see how it works in the collage. Because, in some ways I do like the ambiguity there of the label coming around, but it also might be kind of a nice nice moment in the collage. Bit of like so that would like here. So as I said, this is all right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about gluing. You can, of course, if we would have been doing this in class, we would have been using some Elmer's glue, PVA size, which is a archival adhesive or sizing. I'm using what's called Yes Paste because it has a high tack, and so basically I can apply this to the paper and stick it down, and it will a little bit of room to move it around some. And so I'm going to apply that with a small spatula. And so here I have everything pretty well set up in its place, but I'm going to kind of pull these off piece by piece and kind of stick the glue on with, keeping in mind my composition, placement of things, and we'll one and the 5 down. Just kind of glue some of my larger shapes together. So when you're placing these, look at the shape in between things. Like I'm trying to find this shape here. So it's pretty well parallel to this. So that's how I know where to rotate it. And then I'm looking at the space between this two and this two. Something like that. So now these are on up at the bottom of the composition. So what I was doing there is I actually measured up from here and in from here just to find the placement of this. And weigh it down. All right, and we will, I will have a photo of that when it dries.